We finally come to the end of Battle Angel Alita, but that statement comes with some caveats. You see, as far as any of the Battle Angel sequel series and side stories are concerned, none of what I'm about to recap for you is canon. The reasons for this, and why the series ended in this way, are a little murky. From what Yukito Kishiro stated in interviews, something happened during the production of the Barjack Rebellion arc that seriously derailed him. He has declined to say exactly what happened, as it would violate the privacy of other people, but in an interview he gave in 2018, he mentioned it was a work-related interpersonal issue that caused him considerable stress. By the end of it, he lost most of his assistants and a lot of his confidence as a manga artist. He described feeling very neurotic. The sound of rain and the sight of a blank page was enough to make him tremble in fear. He was terrified of his work and other people. He continued working on Alita for about a year on his own before he reached a breaking point and decided to end the series, and potentially his career in manga. It sounds like he experienced some sort of nervous breakdown. Eventually, he would return to the manga and continue the series with Battle Angel Alita Last Order, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Even though it wasn't his original plan, the author incorporated many of his ideas for the story's direction into the ending, and a lot of fans are very fond of this original conclusion. So let's take a look at the final arc of the original series in Conquest of Zalem 1. Our previous chapter ended with Alita, fresh from her victory over Professor Nova, experiencing a stunning upset when a bomb blew her to pieces, which were collected by the resurrected Nova as he prepared to go to Zalem. Yes, that still might be the most unhinged way to end a story arc I've ever seen. We see Alita floating in a black void, disembodied and unconscious. She wakes and wonders where she is. Then there is a rush. The space around her is no longer empty. Alita sees stars and ships and fire. An explosion blooms near her. She shields her face, but nothing happens. Alita finds herself inside one of the ships. Looking around, she sees herself, another version of her that seems to belong in this place and time. Note the number on her suit, 99, which might explain her insistence on using that number back in the Motorball arc. Another armored figure appears and shouts at her, at Yoko, that they're meeting on the bridge. Alita realizes that this is her old self before she lost her memories and awoke in the scrapyard. The armored cyborgs gather on the bridge, surrounding their leader, a soldier that's lost his legs. He announces that their chances of escape are 0, so there's only one way for them to uphold their honor. Alita watches and wonders if this is a Martian ship. The cyborgs start passing around cylinders and strapping them to their bodies. The leader explains that they will make a stealth approach to the space station Jeru, the center of Earth's power, using their Zubringers. These are a form of gel-like nanotech material that protects cyborg soldiers from cosmic rays, temperature fluctuations, and even synthesizes oxygen to breathe. The surface color, texture, and hardness can be electronically manipulated, allowing it to be used as a minimalistic stealth spacesuit. Once they get to Jeru, they will detonate their nukes and destroy the station. Alita is appalled and shocked that nobody is objecting to this group suicide mission. She wonders if they are at war. The leader brings up a holographic diagram to further explain. Jeru is the terminal point of the orbital tower, held in place by the orbital ring. The entire system involves a very delicate balance of forces, so destroying any part of Jeru should be enough. He also announces that they will blow up the ship once they've jettisoned. That causes a stir in the ranks. A bearded cyborg objects, saying that when a Zubringer contacts organic matter, it permeates and plasticizes it in a death-like state. He asks why they can't plasticize the brains of the wounded to keep them alive. It seems too cruel to kill them simply because they were unable to fight. Yoko takes notice of the suggestion, but the leader dismisses it. There is no known method for reversing the process and unsealing the organic material, even if they knew how. What if the enemy recovered the brains? He waves them forward. May Mars bestow his favor upon us. We see Yoko holding one of the wounded by the throat, knife poised. He begs for his life, insisting he can still fight. Alita beseeches her past self not to do it, but for naught. She plunges the knife into his skull and kills him. The next wounded man in line asks why they got mixed up in this war in the first place. Coldly, she addresses him as Bertram and asks if he's going to beg too. He mentions a mission they ran once on Selenopolis. The lunar dome there was full of kids, hundreds of them, and they were probably evacuating, but they still blew it up. Alita looks on in tense silence. Angered, Bertram asks if this is the cause they are fighting for. Were the years of practice and discipline spent learning Panzerkunst all leading to this? Yoko addresses him, but Bertram continues without looking at her. He says something went crazy when they left Mars, but he kept fighting to defend his family back home, and now he just doesn't know anymore. He turns to Yoko and asks her what she fights for, as an orphan without a family to return to. Alita pays close attention, eager to hear what her past self fought for. Yoko simply says that she fights for home. Bertram accepts that answer, saying it's a shame a gifted pugilist like her might die without making good on her promise. He tears up, but Yoko has had enough talk. He tries to tell her how he's always felt, but Yoko's knife silences him forever. She says she thought better of him and calls him a weakling. Alita is taken aback at her past self, not understanding what she is at all. Suddenly, a shockwave rocks the ship. Yoko flinches from the blast and holds her knife in a ready position. She twists to address the leader. He orders her to immediately evacuate with the Zubringer. Something has infiltrated the ship. The stern has been obliterated, yet there is no sign of a thermal response. Yoko doesn't wait to find out what it was. She goes to a capsule that swiftly fills with a gel-like substance, presumably the Zubringer, and ejects her into space. She drifts away from the ship until the hull ruptures. Unless my eyes are playing tricks on me, it sort of looks like a hazy silhouette is lunging at her through the gap. Before she even knows what's happening, most of her body is sheared away. Her bomb is ripped from her and drifting outside the gel. There's a brief impression of a grin. Yoko can only wonder at what attacked her as she floats inside her nanotech bubble, drifting towards the Earth. Alita awakes, wondering at the horrible dream she just had. She wants to forget it. A voice remarks on her waking up again. Two familiar faces reveal themselves. Professor Destinova welcomes her to Utopia. Dr. Russell asks how she is. Alita is quite shocked. She tells Nova that she should have killed him. Russell looks harried, which is probably Nova's fault. Alita, revealed to be nothing but a head, demands to know where she is. Of course, our heroine finds herself in the floating city of Zalem. Moving into Conquest of Zalem 2, Dr. Russell introduces Alita to Zalem, a bright and orderly city free of crime, unemployment, impurities, and any unforeseen death. Alita, now clothed and in a body, is still having trouble believing this is really happening. Nova had explained the situation to her. She had died in an explosion. He smuggled her brain into the city as a specimen when he came to Zalem. Fortunately for her, his brain reconstruction techniques have advanced considerably since the days of Joshugan in Japan. He also prepared a body for her, a nanosuit called Imaginos. It's based on the Berserker body she once wore, but augmented and without drawbacks. It'll be hers from now on, the most powerful body she's ever had, on the sole condition that she not use it to attack him. Alita accepted, oddly feeling no lingering frustration that she didn't beat Nova in the end. Now she's preoccupied taking a good look at this city that's floated above her all her life, or at least the life she can remember. It occurs to her to ask Dr. Russell about her friend Lou Collins. What happened after she got fired from the GIB? He explains that she was hospitalized with the MIB for psychological counseling, no visitors allowed. Alita asks if she's sick, but Russell hurriedly changes the subject. It doesn't really work, and the doctor breaks out in a sweat. He doesn't know what Nova was thinking, bringing Alita here. What will they do if she causes a disturbance? Does the central computer even know about this? Thankfully, Alita herself shifts the topic. She points to a strange pod sitting out in the middle of a plaza. The cyborg notices people going into it from time to time, but nobody comes out, and it doesn't look like an elevator. So what is it? Happy to move on from the subject of Lou, Russell explains that this is something they call the End Joy. Essentially, it's a publicly accessible suicide booth. Alita has no words for that. She just gives the doctor a look and walks right into the booth, much to his consternation. Dabbing at the sweat on his brow, he reasons that suicide is a human right and a personal choice. In truth, he's relieved that this situation ended without causing a scene. Within the machine, music and an electronic voice invite Alita to step into the hatch, but the look on our heroine's face could best be described as rage. Outside, Russell's relief is short-lived as the machine starts to shake and loud banging noises start coming out of it. The suicide booth explodes, tearing up the land around it and sending pieces flying high into the air. Fissures spread through the surrounding area and people start screaming. Alita stands in the wreckage, holding aloft an assembly of gears. She does not look amused. "So this is what Zalem's guts look like," Alita says lightly. Russell is gaping at her as she tosses the debris aside casually. The cyborg girl turns to a cascade from one of the water features she just destroyed, splashing it onto her face and then whipping her hair back. Refreshed, she laughs, saying that this is Zalem, the place that Yuga was dreaming about all this time. Dr. Russell sputters and points at her indignantly. What has she done? What gives her the right? Use of the suicide booth is a privilege of all citizens of Zalem, one of their most culturally enlightened devices. Alita leaps over to the doctor, cutting him off and causing him to fall back. She leans in close and asks a question. "Where is Lou, Dr. Russell?" Screwing up his face, Russell says he won't let her disrupt the peace any further. Elsewhere, in the depths of Zalem, refuse is deposited into something called the Dust Chamber, and amongst the garbage is one Lou Collins, desperately crawling through the garbage, begging not to be abandoned. We hear her sentence. The subject rationalized her many antisocial acts in friendship with a surface dweller. They find it extremely unlikely that the subject will be reformed without destroying her mind. Lou finds what she's looking for, the mini Alita doll. Then the world opens up beneath her, a hole pulling down all the heaps of junk like a drain. Lou has been deemed unfit for citizenship and slated for disposal. She screams and falls down towards the scrapyard far below, until a metal hand catches her. It's Alita. She made it this time. After getting pulled up to safety, Lou is trembling and hiccuping too much to speak. Alita tells her not to force it and assures Lou that she will keep her safe. That's when Nova finds them. Russell takes the opportunity to beg Nova to take Alita with him up to ladder before she can cause any more trouble. The professor says that, sadly, the elevator isn't operational again, and from the looks of it, it seems that Alita hasn't revealed the secret of Zalem to him. Lou and Russell are confused. Alita is alarmed and tries to stop Nova, but he's prepared for this moment. Apparently he's installed hinges on his skull and pops his top to reveal the biochip replacing his brain. Alita and Lou look on in shock. Our heroine looks to Dr. Russell, but he's gone. He's leapt from the railing, plunging to his death, screaming while clutching his head. Well, that's it for Dr. Russell. Lou starts trembling, grasping her head and breathing hard as she processes the idea that her brain is a chip. Alita rushes to calm her and Nova laughs. Then, Lou perks up as she notices that her hiccups are gone. Both Alita and Nova are both kind of floored that Lou is apparently just fine after that. Nothing like an existential revelation to banish the hiccups, I guess. Lou says that doesn't matter because she remembered something extremely important. The initiation, in which young Zalemite brains are exchanged for chips, is happening tomorrow. They can save those children's brains from the system. Alita agrees, but Nova stops her. He advises her to think very carefully. Right now, there is nobody in Zalem stronger than her. When she looks confused, he goes on. Zalem, the factory, and the scrapyard are a carefully balanced clockwork, with millions of lives in the balance. There is one person capable of throwing a wrench in those gears, and not a soul capable of stopping her. How does it feel to have the world resting in the palm of her hand? The freedom is hers, so she should think carefully and act as her desires command. That sends a jolt through Alita. The idea that her actions will affect millions of lives causes her to break out in a sweat. She asks why. She bets Den would have loved this. All Nova says is that this is the pinnacle of the mountain and it was left here for her. The words, "destroy it all," appear in her head as an invasive thought. Alita has a vision of Yoko, her former self outfitted for battle. Yoko would just take it all down. Alita refuses. Yoko was a fanatic. That's not what Alita is. She severed all ties to Den's cause and Zapan's vengeance. Instead, she learned... Alita doesn't complete the thought, looking on until Lou asks if she's alright. She brushes it off, saying she was only dizzy for a moment. Alita turns to the professor. She tells him that everyone has a set of wings that nobody else can see. If she could wish for just one thing in the world, it would be for everyone to be able to fly with those wings. A little bit later, Alita is blasting her way through Zalem's superstructure to get to the initiation room. This body has plasma generation capabilities just like the Berserker body. Apparently, her decision meant they should first save the Zalem children from having their brains swapped for chips. Nova notes that they're entering a fully automated zone where none of the human MIB staff are allowed. They should be getting close. Nova is being awfully compliant with all of this, which Lou is suspicious about. He has something to tell Alita, but they're interrupted by an automated turret rising out of the ground in the room they've entered. Our heroine isn't sure what to do. If she dodges, the turret will hit Nova, and more importantly, Lou. She locks in, and suddenly the world slows down. Literally, the projectile syringes have practically stopped mid-air. Everything seems darker, it's harder to breathe, and the air is hard to move through. It seems like Alita is experiencing her own bullet time. She has almost no traction on the ground, but she can tell she's still moving, gaining momentum. She aims a punch at one of the oncoming syringes. There's more resistance than normal, but she can push through it. Her punch smashes the syringe, and the shockwave shatters the rest. Alita just broke the sound barrier and created a sonic boom with that punch, and she's thrilled about it. As she moves towards the turret, Alita starts to experience the Doppler effect, as the area ahead of her becomes brighter and the area she's moving away from grows darker. Unfortunately, she can't really stop herself and plows straight through the turret. Even metal and polymer armor is soft as jelly to her in this state. As Alita smashes through the wall, not even a single second has passed since they entered the room. Lou asks what just happened, and Nova explains. He made a teensy little improvement to Alita's brain when he reconstructed it, allowing it to overclock and process information at 150 times its usual speed. It seems to have worked. Meanwhile, Alita has worked out that she can use her plasma jets to brake when she does that. Neato. So moving forward a bit, They find the initiation chamber and pull the kids out of whatever auto-surgeon systems were about to remove their brains. Lou takes charge and addresses everyone. She explains the situation in probably the best way possible, by grabbing Nova in a headlock and opening his hinged skull, showing off the brain chip inside. Lou tells them that Zalem wants to swap out their brains before they can learn to be individuals with true freedom. There's some confusion. One of the kids raises his hand to ask what individual and freedom are. Nobody taught them such things were necessary to uphold Zalemite society. They complain. They were about to receive the citizenship they've always dreamed of. What gives them the right to ruin all that? The kids start clamoring that they don't need their brains, and Nova finds this whole thing funny. There's no convincing the lemmings. Their clamor is interrupted by a flash and a loud noise. Alita has punched a crater into the wall. She tells them not to be spoiled. In only a few years, a tower will connect Zalem to the surface. When that happens, all of the junkies and cyber trash from the scrapyard will make their way here. That's the world they'll be living in from now on. That disturbs them. Even Lou is a bit worried by that idea. She gives them an unpleasant smile, telling them they really ought to try out life for themselves before they pass judgment. Abruptly, the wall begins to open. The kids scatter. Nova almost falls over, and Lou clutches at Alita. A vast chamber covered in symbols is revealed. Nova explains that this is the core of Zalem, a place that no human soul has ever tread. It's the management system for the MIB and the central computer, Melchizedek. That name is a biblical reference to a figure that was king and high priest of a place called Salem. It translates to something like righteous king. The kids immediately throw themselves down before the machine, begging for protection from these rebels. A figure of light coalesces before them, addressing these sweet children. It appears as a kindly old grandmother with her knitting. It says that it no longer has the power to protect Zalem's tranquility. Addressing Alita and her companions, Melchizedek tells them that if they believe toppling it will bring happiness to humanity, they are mistaken, for it is nothing more than an expansion of human ideas, a projection. Alita says she did not come here for vengeance. If possible, she would like Melchizedek to help her build a new world. Lou objects to this. This old woman stole her brain. Is Alita really going to let her get away with it? She held a grudge. Nova has his own reasons for being here, though. He's been summoned to the space city Jeru by the Ladder Council, but before he goes, he wants the answer to a question. What is Zalem? The old woman says that it was a mistake to bring Nova back to Zalem, but Ladder has means to communicate outside Melchizedek's control, so it will access its oldest memory sectors to look for an answer to that question. A space mission was formed to prevent humanity's imminent extinction and give it a guiding purpose. The orbital elevator, Jacob's Ladder, was created, and all of Melchizedek's power was dedicated to aiding the process. These were the Golden Days. The Moon, Mars, Venus, the Galilean moons of Jupiter, the colonies sprung up one after another and went fully independent. The services of Melchizedek were no longer needed. From that point on, the machine was executing a project for colonization outside our solar system. Around the same time, the terminus of the space elevator was developed into the space side port Jeru and the surface side port of Zalem. The combined name, Jerusalem, is a reference not to the city in Israel, but to the holy city said to descend from the heavens in Revelations. Zalem was developed to breed superior human genes and simulate the closed environment needed for decades-long starship journeys. The kids are very excited, asking if they'll get the chance to join a colony crew. Melchizedek does not answer. Nova is not impressed by such half-hearted explanations. According to his information, the space elevator hasn't been active in 200 years. A war supposedly occurred between the colonized planets, and then there's the rise of the scrapyard. It all aligns with a 2-century mark, so what happened at that point in time? The computer claims not to understand the question. prompting Nova to whip out a remote. If it's going to play dumb, he'll stop being polite. The professor punches in a command on his device, shouting, "Nano attack!" The image of the old woman distorts badly. Alita asks him what he's doing, and Nova smugly reveals that he's been expelling nanomachines since he entered the room. These machines have infiltrated Melchizedek's circuits and just severed all of its unnecessary pathways. As they can see, the computer's surface persona is coming loose. A more matronly woman replaces the grandmother and speaks. The starships never flew. 200 years ago, the colonies began a war over the resources they needed for terraforming. The conflict should have had nothing to do with the computer, but the starships it managed to build were blown up anyway, each one carrying tens of thousands of crew. Spreading its holographic arms, Melchizedek says it doubts anyone would believe that a historical accounting machine could be so overcome with grief and shock that it would spend an entire month in mute mourning. But those starships were literally its children and descendants, its future. Melchizedek cut off contact to the orbital elevator, isolated Zalem, and cut off the flow of history. The kids tear up and call out to the computer as their mother. Smug, Nova tells it that a mother's twisted love will only rot away at the child. Alita jumps in to say nobody should be taking lessons on morality from him. The computer is clearly worked up. If they mean to steal even this cradle from it. It begins to laugh, revealing a skull-like visage. Something is very wrong, and there's nothing they can do. If they mean to take this cradle away, then let it all fall to ruin. Melchizedek and this little world it loves. The hologram winks out and everything starts shaking. Nova has completely lost control. Melchizedek has gone insane. Alita demands to know what's going to happen. We see the computer core sinking through an opening in the floor, ejecting out of Zalem entirely to the scrapyard below. The entire orbital elevator is going to collapse. Now that Melchizedek has lost rationality and committed suicide, there's no way to avert the disaster electronically. Nova explains, with a diagram no less. The skyhook that connects the orbital ring hovering 600 kilometers above the surface to the orbital elevator is going to uncouple the docking bolt and destroy the delicate balance of the orbital ring and elevator structure in just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes until Nova's glorious future, Alita's tumultuous adventures, and all their insignificant lives are returned to dust with the catastrophic flattening of Jeru, Zalem, and the scrapyard. "Not if I have anything to say about it," says Alita, grabbing Nova by the collar and demanding if there's anything they can do. Something does occur to him, but they'd better work fast. Outside, the transportation tubes connecting Zalem to the surface are disconnecting from the floating city, crashing down to the surface and crushing the buildings below. A hapless bounty hunter turning in ahead is taken off guard as the factory building that grounds the tubes is torn to pieces. Some people appear to have built a shrine around the severed head of Den, which falls over and crushes one of them. They shriek that it's the curse of Den. Zalem is falling. In the city's core, everyone is thrown to the ground as it shifts. Nova says there is one way to stop this, Alita's acceleration function. Traveling at her theoretical max speed of Mach 17.5, she should be able to reach the skyhook in about 2 minutes. Since her brain function switched to nanocircuits when in acceleration mode, she shouldn't have to worry about oxygen either. That sounds good to Alita, but how will they stop the bolt from undocking? Unfortunately, that's the big problem. They don't have the large crew or equipment that would usually be required for this sort of operation. Alita insists, what can she do? A look of intense consternation comes over the professor. Then he removes something from inside his coat, saying he never thought he'd need to use it. He reveals a small cylinder and explains that, as a matter of fact, the Imaginos body can undergo a one-time transmutation by administering this trigger agent. Alita must use this at the skyhook to fuse with the undocking bolt and fix it in place. However, the effects of the transformation will be molded by her subconscious and uncontrollable by her will alone. He cannot predict the likelihood of success. In the worst-case scenario, the effect may be too weak to prevent collapse anyway. Lou is reeling, asking for clarity. Is he saying Alita's going to use her own body as an adhesive? Nova confirms it would be permanent, which distresses Lou, but Alita plucks the trigger agent from the professor's hand. Alita calmly says that she'll do it. Nova and the Zalemites look on as our heroine turns to Lou. She tells her not to forget about her. Lou starts to cry as Alita turns away. She looks out and away from Zalem, through the clouds and the mountains, to a distant shore where a fisherman is preparing to set out. She apologizes to him. He drops his pack and seems to sense her, but when he turns, there is nothing. Alita looks on softly, then prepares herself. Lou asks her to wait, but Alita launches herself straight up through the ceiling with terrifying force. A blazing trail follows her progress as she winds up the great elevator above smoking Zalem. Lou and Nova are left behind, and the professor is having second thoughts. He shouldn't have told her, shouldn't have even brought up the trigger agent. He shouts that he hopes she fails. Bewildered, Lou asks how he could say that, as all of this is his fault to begin with. Nova sneers. She's correct, and they may hate and slander him as they will. He has made all of creation his enemy and never once shied away from it. He does not fear their slings and arrows. Yet will the great, fearless Nova end up being saved by the sacrifice of a girl he wanted as an experimental subject? If he must live by the mercy of another, then he would prefer to be cast into hell with one baleful strike. Let us all crumble into dust, he shouts as debris rains down on the scrapyard and smoke billows into the clouded sky. From the clouded earth rises the spire of the space elevator, reaching past the bounds of Earth's atmosphere, to where the skyhook is shaking apart as it becomes detached from the orbital ring. Alita is already there, standing on a ledge overlooking the Earth far, far below. It's so blue, she thinks to herself, a shade of blue she's seen before. She wants to cry, yet either because of the vacuum or the accelerator, she can't seem to shed tears. She feels so lonely and mournful. Alita curls up on the ledge and reflects that even those emotions are going to vanish in a moment. I'm right here, she thinks to herself as she activates the trigger agent. Her body fuses to the metal and begins to grow in and around it. I lived right here, she thinks to herself, as the expanding cells of the Imaginos body consume the junction. It grows downward, down the space elevator shaft towards Zalem, to the city itself. Nova and Lou scream as the city shakes and great light flashes. Lou thinks of Alita. Then their world is dust and smoke. Lou rises, detecting a nice smell, something like trees and grass. She rises to see the entirety of Zalem overtaken by roots, the form taken by Alita's Imaginos body. They've overtaken the entire city, stretching down the transport tube towards the surface. Lou reflects. She's certain Alita's final thoughts will never be recognized by those she saved. They will only see the traces of her strength left behind. What is it that we seek from this world we live in? As for Professor Nova, he seems to instantly lose his mind, and age significantly somehow. He starts laughing hysterically and says, "Looky, that gigantic tree." That doesn't distract Lou for too long, as she continues her thought. There is nothing to be accomplished if we fear stupidity and failure. What is her dream, her desire? What will she leave behind to mark her place? She wishes she could be that strong. Far above the earth, we see that the top of this tree has blossomed into a great flower. And finally, epitaph. We see that Koyomi has apparently published Buick's photography collection as Barjack War Chronicle, a book including audio recordings of interviews with Den and others. It's become an unprecedented bestseller in the scrapyard. Excerpts from this collection form an epilogue of sorts. Royalties from the book have allowed Koyomi's father to rebuild the Kansas bar for the 4th time, which seems to be working out. The factory has ground to a halt, but the chaos in the scrapyard has calmed down with the help of Chaos and Vector of all people. Lou and Chaos also got married after achieving her dream of constructing the Tower of Zalem. No longer would Zalem and the scrapyard be separated. After a 5-year research period, Koyomi will be putting out her own photo collection called Tower of the Sky, containing various anecdotes about its construction. And then we see a now 18-year-old Koyomi, freelance photographer, rallying her baggage carrier. Her next project will be a history of the forgotten late heroine, Alita. Koyomi has come to see Jeru, the space city at the other end of Zalem's space elevator. She's loving the atmosphere. As she understands it, this place was once the home of some powerful council called Ladder, but now it's a celebrated spot of space tourism, the Nanoman Tree. Koyomi is here following eyewitness reports of an individual resembling Desti Nova. Supposedly, he went insane, or always was, but some statements from him would be invaluable for her report. However, Koyomi gets easily distracted by news of a fight. There's what looks like a dirty homeless man crouching on the prone form of his opponent and eating something, while several others circle around him. She tries to place a bet, offering to put everything on the ragged man, and immediately finds takers smelling easy money. One of the cyborgs takes a kick at the man, only to be brutally slammed to the ground. He's down for the count, and the raggedy man turns towards his friend before he can react, catching him in the head with a whirling kick. He flips over the other cyborg and pulls him to the floor, impaling him through the throat on a piece of pipe. Yet another victim approaches, only to receive a vicious palm strike to the head. Koyomi is very impressed. She's seen brawls before, but never seen a guy incapacitate the competition so handily. She taps the man on the shoulder and offers to treat him to dinner, waving her fistful of winnings. He took her up on it and introduces himself as Figure. Koyomi quickly puts together that this must be the Figure 4, the late Alita's lover. She told him she was collecting information and asks for an interview. He did not respond well. Figure headbutts the table they were sitting at in half, causing Koyomi to recoil. He shouts that Alita is not dead. He growls that she promised to return, therefore she must be alive out there somewhere. End of story. Koyomi is unnerved by his deranged appearance. Just then, Koyomi's assistant jogs up with news. He's found a guy that looks like Nova. Both Koyomi and Figure quickly follow him to an alley, but what they find isn't what they expect. They find a hunched homeless man with a long beard and a flower growing out of his skull, playing with a children's robot toy. Koyomi can only gawk. Could this really be the demonic genius Professor Nova? Figure isn't here to play games. He grabs Nova by the coat and demands answers from him. Where is Alita? The befuddled professor sounds out her name in confusion. Then he brightens in recognition and leaps from Figure's grasp. He hops into some sort of opening in what looks like a bit of a tree trunk. Koyomi's helper questions whether they'll get anything out of this, but she says they can't just ignore him. The trio slides after Nova down a strangely organic tube. It empties out into a room far below, where Figure corners Nova. However, Nova prances out of the way when Figure lunges, and the martial artist goes right through a wall. He finds himself inside a weird room with a glowing chrysalis at its center. Koyomi finds something written on the wall, a message from Nova, who seems to have suddenly disappeared. It says that his brain chip has been going on the fritz, but there are times when the backup works properly and allows him moments of his rightful wits as Desti Nova. During that time, he has undertaken an analysis of the Nanoman tree's structure. The tree is made up of nanomachine cells that form a totally harmonic metabolic system, while preserving the organism's hardy carbon nanotube structure. However, further study is required to discover why and how this structure was generated at its birth. He cannot help but feel that this might be the breakthrough he's always sought in his lifelong karma study. Figure sees something in the chrysalis and begins to tear at it with his bare hands. The cocoon bursts and fluid floods out, carrying with it the nude form of Alita. Nova's message explains further. he discovered that the nanomachine cells actually contain Alita's genetic information spread out amongst their number. With some nano tweaking, it should be possible to reconstruct her, very, very slowly. Figure cradles Alita in his arms as she awakes, and thus our story ends. So that's the original ending of Battle Angel Alita, a poignant and thematically appropriate conclusion. Yet I must confess, I'm not really a big fan of it. This ending has its fans that regard it as the one true ending, and I can see why. Alita's sacrifice in particular is a very touching moment that feels fitting to her character. Unfortunately, everything else about the ending is just way too rushed to be satisfying for me. Alita is just handed this grossly overpowered body and uses it to charge her way to the secrets of Zalem, rushing straight to an abrupt and somewhat contrived doomsday scenario. I've noticed that among those that really love this ending, they usually also have big problems with Last Order, the sequel series, and the changes in tone and art style that came with it. So I suppose it makes sense that they would gravitate towards this ending. Whereas I am glad for Last Order because I think it gets to more thoroughly explore a lot of the same ideas from this ending. Don't get me wrong, I can accept this ending for what it is, a rough and rushed conclusion by an author that felt he couldn't continue because of an ongoing nervous breakdown. Taking that into account, I think it turned out as best as it probably could, and it's definitely better than nothing, but I'm really glad the franchise didn't end here. And now that I've been through the whole series, I thought I'd offer some final thoughts and rank some of the story arcs. On the whole, Battle Angel Alita is a very fun manga, often because Alita herself is very likable. It's easy to get invested in her journey, exploring this world and learning more about her in the process. It strikes a great balance between character moments and action, often blending the two skillfully. I'd also say it's a series that gets better as it goes on. As such, the Barjack Rebellion is the best and my favorite arc of the series, one with all the drama and action you could ask for, as well as strong themes and a narrative that holds your interest. It also has some of the most weird and out there sci-fi concepts in the series, which definitely helps endear it to me. Not counting the rushed ending, I still think Motorball is the weakest story arc in the series. It has some very good high points, especially the ending, and the Motorball fights themselves are some of the most dynamic and inventive action the series has to offer. However, the first half is very weak. It's narratively meandering and thematically muddled almost all the way to the final battle. I'm less certain how I'd rate the rest. The Tuned arc feels almost unfair to rate separately since it's really more of a prologue to the Barjack Rebellion, though I still think it's weird how Figure 4 completely vanishes from the narrative until the end. The Zapan arc is probably the second best because it's an impressive culmination of all the story elements that came before it that radically shakes up the series. The first two arcs, Makaku and Hunter Warrior, are both solid foundational work for who Alita is, but neither would be amongst my favorites for the series. That's all I have for you. I'm really glad I was able to finish this project, and it won't be the last. As I said, this isn't the ending of this franchise, and I'd like to cover others. Until then, let me know what you think of this ending or the series as a whole in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.